We're going to talk a little bit about refuge today, specifically taking refuge by knowing the distinguishing features of the three jewels, and taking refuge, accepting the three objects of refuge as ideals, taking refuge by not speaking in favor of other refuges, and also some of the guidelines once you've taken refuge. The guidelines to help you keep your refuge and deepen your refuge. Okay? So, first, to start with taking refuge by knowing the distinguishing features of the three jewels. So our old friend Joe Blow pops up here, and he says, each of the three jewels has so many qualities, so is it sufficient to take refuge in only one? Okay, can I bargain, in other words? And the answer is no. We need to take refuge in all three because there's differences in various aspects. So first of all, they have different characteristics. Okay, the Buddha is the one who's abandoned all defects and developed all good qualities. He can see the two truths simultaneously. He's omniscient. Okay, the Dharma is the true paths and the true cessations that the Buddha taught to meet sentient beings' needs, and teaching the Dharma is the reason the Buddha appeared in the world. And then the Sangha are those who have realized the Dharma directly, in other words, who have direct realization of emptiness. And so they can give us guidance so we can do the same. And they prove the validity and usefulness of everything the Buddha taught, because the Sangha has actualized it by following the Dharma that the Buddha taught. It shows that the whole system works. Okay? So that was the difference in their characteristics, and you can see because they have those different characteristics, why you have to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, that just one won't work. Okay, so they also have are different in terms of their enlightening influence. Okay, so the Buddha gives the transmitted and realizational Dharma. So the transmitted Dharma is what's passed down by teaching. Okay, realization Dharma is what we realize in our own mind. Okay, in other words, the Buddha says what to practice and what to abandon. That's the main thing he teaches. And he transmits the Dharma in the most effective way to us. Okay? The Sangha eliminates the afflictions and suffering. And, the Dharma eliminates the afflictions and suffering. You were sleeping. And the Sangha gives us encouragement, inspiration, and assistance when we practice. And also through knowing by taking refuge in the Sangha, we know that we're not alone. Okay? So here again, because of their difference in their enlightening influence, how they influence us in a positive way, then we need to take refuge in all three. They're also different in terms of the aspirations or the kind of devotion or fervent regard that we have for each of the three. So in terms of the Buddha, we aspire to make offerings, we have devotion and respect, we show respect for the Buddha's help and for the teachings by offering and being of service and practicing and so on. Okay, in terms of the Dharma, we aspire to put it into practice and transform our minds into the Dharma, and that's how we show our high regard for the Dharma. So the Buddha, we show the high regard, by more devotional types of things, but the Dharma by transforming our minds. And the Sangha, we show our regard by practicing together with them and joining in their efforts to sustain the Dharma for future generations. Okay. Then the three jewels are often also different in terms of how we practice in relationship to the three of them. So the Buddha is our role model of what we want to become. So we do make offerings and prostrations and show respect to create the merit to become the Buddha. That's how we practice in relationship with the Buddha. In relationship to the Dharma, we learn it, we practice it, we meditate on it, we integrate it with our body, speech, and mind. Yeah. In terms of the Sangha, we practice with it by practicing together harmoniously with the Sangha, by sharing the teachings, by the Sangha community sharing the material possessions, and also by following the example of the Sangha Jewel. So again, differences in how we practice in relationship to the three jewels. Yeah. And then the fifth difference or distinction is what qualities to remember or what qualities to be mindful of in these three. So in terms of the Buddha, we're mindful or we remember that he's free from the three poisonous minds, that he has wisdom, compassion, omniscient mind, and the capability to lead us to enlightenment. The Dharma has good results in the beginning, middle, and end. Yeah, when we practice it, that's the quality that, we're mindful of the goodness of the Dharma. And the Sangha, the good quality to remember is that they're on the right path, they're impartial, so they're true friends, and they're objects of respect who can provide companionship to us on the path. So the Sangha Jewel, like the Buddha, isn't going to play favorites and, help one and not help the other and so on. And then the sixth difference in terms of the three jewels is how we create merit in terms of each of them. So in terms of the Buddha, we create merit, again, offering, prostrating, to the Buddha, these kind of more devotional things. To the Dharma, we gain merit by putting it into practice in our own mind. And the Sangha, we create merit by doing virtuous activities together with them and by making offerings to them and also offering them respect. Okay? But you can see, like, when you go to a big teaching and you have many practitioners around you, you feel very, very inspired. So think about if they were all the Sangha Jewel who had realized emptiness, then the way you practiced around the three jewels would be, quite magnetic or magnetizing, wouldn't it? Okay. Then the next outline is taking refuge through accepting the three objects of refuge as ideals. Okay, so all these, if we meditate on all these three, it's good to, go through these outlines and really meditate and make examples so that we really understand how to relate to the three jewels and how to actually take refuge in our mind, We talk a lot about refuge, but if we really meditate on this, it'll show us how to do it. Okay, so through accepting them as ideals, first regarding the Buddha, by accepting the Buddha as the ideal teacher, then we look at the Buddha as the doctor. Okay, by accepting the Dharma as the ideal refuge, then the Dharma becomes what will actually free us, in other words, the medicine. And by accepting the Sangha as ideal friends for helping us realize the path, then we relate to the Sangha as the nurses. So that's one way of talking about how to accept the three objects of refuge as ideal. Another way is to see the Buddha as the ideal that we will definitely attain, our ultimate role model. And and Buddha is what we aim for, to see the Dharma as definitely being the ideal method to actualize full awakening, and third, to see the Sangha as the definite companions who will help us on the path that we can rely on and trust. Okay. And then the next outline is taking refuge by not speaking in favor of other refuges. Okay, in other words, how to keeping your refuge clear on the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha without going, well, maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other thing. Okay? So if you have indecisive wavering about refuge, you won't get anywhere in your practice. Yeah? And you can see why, because if you don't know who your guides are, how are you going to get anywhere by practicing their guidance? And if you're not sure, if you have a lot of doubts about who your guides are, well, maybe I should practice another religion, and, that guide seems better. So, we have to really try and develop certainty through understanding the qualities and the functions of the three jewels, And then, so to dispel this kind of doubt, we have to, we can also learn about the founders of other doctrines and their teachings and their disciples. So their, founder, their Dharma teachings, their, community around them. And then see the difference between these and the Buddha Dharma Sangha. So, since many of us have grown up in other religions, it can be very helpful to think about, the founder of that religion, what the teachings were, what the path was, how the path was laid out, and then what the community around, how they were, how they practiced. And then through that, we can see why, the Buddha Dharma Sangha is a supreme refuge. Because in one way, you can look at the Four Noble Truths of any religion. I mean, if you take a theistic religion, how do they define the, dukkha, what's unsatisfactory? What do they say is the cause of it? Is it Adam and Eve? Okay. What is the ultimate goal you're aiming for? What's the cessation of that suffering? And then how do you get there? What path does that religion say? Is it to propitiate an external being? What is it? Okay? So, while in general we do not, go about learning others' religions because, if we already know what we believe in, we want to concentrate on that. Sometimes it can be helpful to learn this stuff and then really think about it, and it helps us to see, the excellent qualities of the three jewels that are our objects of refuge. Okay? And then, because we may find that some other founders of religions or teachers are jealous. They want offerings, they want reputation. They're going to judge you if you don't pay them homage or if you don't believe in them or something. Some other teachings require severe asceticism, and so they don't really lead to liberation because you're too busy, torturing the body. The Buddha Dharma's four seals. Remember the four seals? So they're backed by logic and analysis, not by blind faith. Okay, so that's, a real quality of the Dharma that we can rely on. And then some followers of other faiths, they're very elitist, or they're full of desire, or, kind of we're the supreme, people, or the supreme whatever, and they don't want to let other people in. Whereas the Sangha is impartial and compassionate and doesn't harm others at all. Okay, so again, you look at the qualities of the Buddha Dharma Sangha. It helps you really to appreciate them and to take refuge in them and to know how to relate to them. Okay. So then, when you've really thought about the qualities of the three jewels, which were discussed earlier, I'm not doing that today. When you know the qualities, then you know these different distinctions in the three jewels and how to relate to them. Then you may want to take refuge officially And you do that by requesting a teacher to do the refuge ceremony for you. And at the time you take refuge, you can also take the 5 precepts. Some teachers say you have to take at least 1 precept. Some teachers say you don't have to take any precepts when you take refuge. Some say you have to take all 5, so you have to check it out. Okay, actually, the refuge that we do in front of a teacher is a more public statement of what's going on in our heart. But that is like the deepening of refuge, because the real refuge occurs in our heart, and it deepens as we continue to practice. Okay, so I always say refuge isn't an on and off light switch. It's one of the turning ones that gets brighter and brighter, as you practice. And so, doing the ceremony is a way to connect you to the lineage of practitioners. Some people don't like ceremonies. They don't need to, do the official ceremony if they don't want to. But some people like to, because it also gives you this feeling of being connected to a whole bunch of human beings who actually practiced what you're starting out practicing, and who achieved very good results and high realizations from doing that. So taking refuge in that way really gives you a lot of confidence and inspiration in your practice. Okay? Then once you've taken refuge, then there's different guidelines that help you to keep your refuge and develop it and deepen it, instead of just saying, I take refuge, and then, the next day you forget all about it and you go about doing things the same old way and digging yourself into the same old holes, okay? So, so this first set of guidelines comes from one of Assanga's texts, Compendium of Determination. So there's 8 points here. So first, an analogy to taking refuge in the Buddha: commit yourself wholeheartedly to a qualified spiritual mentor. So when you first take refuge in the ceremony, you may not yet have the feeling of somebody being one of your spiritual mentors. In actual fact, the person giving you the refuge ceremony becomes one of your spiritual mentors. But you may not feel that connection at that time, and it could be that, later on you meet another teacher that you have more sync more with, and that person becomes your main teacher, so that's also fine. So there's no pressure to find a teacher right away and commit yourself to a teacher. It's much better to go about things slowly, examine people's qualities, see if they're teaching accurately, and see if you have the karma with them, so that you feel inspired by how they practice and you feel admiration in them. So go slowly in finding spiritual mentors. And then second, in analogy to taking refuge in the Dharma, what we should do is listen to and practice the teachings, as well as put them into practice in our daily life. So that's real clear. That's if you're not going to do that, then you don't really need to take refuge. Okay? And then third, in analogy to taking refuge to the Sangha, respect the Sangha as your spiritual companions and follow the good examples they set. Okay? Now, here we have to talk about the meaning of Sangha. Okay? The Sangha that we take refuge in is the Sangha Jewel. Those people, individuals who can be either monastics or lay followers, who have direct realization of emptiness. Okay, they are the Sangha Jewel that we take refuge in. The representation of the Sangha Jewel is a community of 4 or more fully ordained monks or nuns. Okay, not novices, not lay people, but fully ordained people, because they're keeping the precepts, they've committed their whole life to it, so they act as the representative of the Sangha Jewel. Nowadays, in the West, very often people use the term Sangha to refer to anybody who comes to a Buddhist center. Okay? This is not the traditional use. His Holiness does not use the word this way. And I've seen times where people will ask His Holiness the question about the Sangha, referring to just anybody who may or may not be a Buddhist, and His Holiness gives the answer thinking of the Sangha community, the monastic community. Okay? The reason that I don't advocate calling everybody at a Buddhist center, or even the whole community at a Buddhist center, the Sangha, is because not everybody at the center, or who comes to a temple or whatever, may know the Dharma or may even consider themselves a Buddhist. So then, and some of the people may or may not keep good ethical conduct because they may or may not have precepts. So then it becomes confusing when you hear take refuge in the Sangha, and you look around and there's Joe Blow who has an alcohol problem, and there's Susie who's sleeping with somebody else, and there's a couple of other people for the center who are fighting with each other, and you say, I take refuge in these people and they're going to lead me to enlightenment? Huh? Okay? So that it just doesn't work, When we think of the taking refuge or following the good example, we have to really look at the minimum to people who are keeping good ethical conduct. Yeah? So I think to avoid that kind of confusion, to use the term Sangha for the monastic community, yeah, and to use just Buddhist community to refer to the people at a Dharma center. Okay? But here it's talking about the monastic Sangha, and so to see them as your spiritual companions and follow the good examples they set. So I want to emphasize good examples, because monastics, we're human beings with defilements. Sometimes we goof. Sometimes we don't act properly. Do not follow the Sangha's bad examples. Okay? So we have to really be careful about this, because sometimes we'll hear stories about how other people practice, even great practitioners, and then we'll think, oh, I should practice exactly like them. So we might hear about Milarepa, for example, who went up into the mountains and ate nettles and wore hardly anything and meditated all the time. And then we think, okay, I'm a brand new Buddhist, I'm going to follow Milarepa's example and do that. Well, no, you're not ready to. Yeah, unless you have some really extraordinary karma from a previous life. So, although Milarepa's definitely part of the Sangha Jewel because he has realizations, and that's definitely a good example that he's showing, we also need to see, I'm not capable of doing what Milarepa's doing. So I shouldn't really try to emulate that at this particular time in my practice, Or, on the other hand, if you see somebody who may be a teacher, they may, because there's no certification process for becoming a teacher in Buddhism. Basically, if there's people who follow you, you become a teacher. So there may be somebody who has people following them who does not behave very well. Okay? So you shouldn't say, well, that person's a student, yeah? Or they're a monastic, or whatever it is, and they're doing this and this and this, so that means I can do it too. No. We always look at what the basic precepts are that the Buddha taught, and we always, have to be real honest about what level we're at and how we need to act. And so not to follow people's bad examples. Okay? Or not to think that we can follow their extremely good examples when we don't have the qualifications to do so. Okay? Then the fourth one is to avoid being rough and arrogant, running after any desirable object you see, and criticizing anything that meets with your disapproval. Shall we skip that one? That one's really hard, isn't it? Avoid being rough and arrogant. I'm a big know-it-all, pushing people around, running after any desirable object we see. This is what we do all day, isn't it? And criticizing anything that meets with our disapproval. I don't like this, I don't like that, why are they doing this, why are they doing that? Okay, so here it is, first step on the path, the Refuge guidelines. Pretty heavy, this is weighty, a weighty thing to practice. The next one is be friendly and kind to others and be concerned more with correcting your own faults than with pointing out those of others. That's another one we want to skip, isn't it? Yeah, be friendly and kind to others. But I'm in a bad mood. I don't want to be friendly and kind to them. They should be friendly and kind to me first. Okay? And be more concerned with correcting your own faults than with pointing out those. But why should I do that? Because this person does this, and then that they do. This one doesn't do what they're supposed to, and that one's always messing around, and that one doesn't do their chores, and that one burps, and that one this and that. We're always pointing out faults in other people, aren't we? Okay, so these two are they're big, aren't they? And then the sixth one is, as much as possible, avoid the 10 non-virtuous actions and take and keep precepts. So that's also hard to avoid the 10 non-virtues, isn't it? That's not so easy. And then when it says take and keep precepts, it's referring to like the one-day precepts or the 8 Mahayana precepts or, the 5 lay precepts, the monastic precepts, and so on. And the reason this is a guideline is because if you keep the precepts, your practice goes better, And then 7 is to have a compassionate and sympathetic heart towards all other sentient beings. That one's also difficult, because they should have a compassionate and sympathetic heart towards me. Shouldn't they? Why should I have a kind heart towards them? They need to have a kind heart towards me first. Then I'll have a kind heart towards them. Right? Then, number 8, make special offerings to the 3 jewels on Buddhist festival days. Okay, so this can mean full and new moon to make offerings, or on the 4 special holy days, the Day of Miracles, Vesak, the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing away, the turning of the Dharma wheel day, and then Labak Duchen, the day the Buddha descended from the God realm of the 33, after teaching his mother the Abbey Dharma in the summer, which coincidentally falls on Sunday. Yeah. So we should remember to make special offerings. We'll do Lama Chopa that evening, I think. Okay, then there's guidelines in terms of each of the 3 jewels. Okay, so how to practice in relation to each of the 3. So this comes from the oral tradition. So first is having taken refuge in the Buddha, who has purified all defilements and developed all excellent qualities. Do not turn for refuge to worldly deities who lack the capacity to guide you from all problems. Okay, so don't take refuge in, a Judeo-Christian God, or in seance deities, or in spirits, or in mediums, well, not the medium is the person, it's the oracle who's the spirit. Is that right? Yeah. And, so all these, because these spirit beings, they may tell fortunes and do things like this, but their clairvoyance is not superior, and they can be wrong. And if you follow them, you can get really stuck. Yeah. So really keep our refuge in the Buddha, not in lesser spirits or so on. And then to respect all images of the Buddha. So don't put them in low or dirty places. Don't step over them. Point your feet towards them. Sell them to earn a living or use them as collateral. Okay, so all of our Buddha statues, our pictures, even if you're storing something, you do not put it on the floor in the closet. It's always up higher, or at least something's underneath it. And you wrap it and you keep it clean. And if you have an altar, then you keep it clean. Yeah? And, you know, if you're in the meditation hall and you need to stretch your legs, you stretch them to the side. You know, and people always go, well, why? You know, I mean, why can't I stretch my legs towards the Buddha? And you know, the answer is it's disrespectful. And they say, why is that disrespectful? And I say, well, if you go into a job interview, would you put your feet up on the desk of the person who's interviewing you and point the soles of your feet towards that person? No. Then why would you sit in that kind of position in relationship to the Buddha, who is more important than a prospective employer? Okay? When looking at various images or paintings of the Buddha, don't discriminate, this Buddha is beautiful, but this one isn't. But you can talk about the artistry. This artistry is good, this artistry is not so good. You know, and similarly, don't treat, you know, very expensive, gorgeous statues really well, and then, you know, statues that may be damaged or are not very costly, you just kind of brush them aside and don't treat them well. Don't do that. Yeah? Okay, so this is a practice of mindfulness. From the side of the Buddha, Buddha doesn't need us to show respect and do these things. But from our side, we need to be mindful of how we relate to holy beings. So that's why this guideline is in place, because it helps our mind to pay attention and to cultivate proper respect. Okay, then having taken refuge in the Dharma, avoid harming any living being. Body, speech, with our body, speech, and mind. Yeah, bottom line. And then also respect the written words which describe the path to awakening by keeping the text clean and in a high place. Avoid stepping over them, putting them on the floor, or throwing them in the rubbish when they are old. It's best to burn or recycle old Dharma materials. Okay, so same with your Dharma texts. Yeah, keep them clean. Put them up high. Don't put them on the shelf with your sci-fi books and your dime novels, okay? Don't leave your books hanging around and then put your coffee cup on top of it. Don't even put your glasses and mala on top of it, you know? Don't put your Dharma books on the floor. And people go, well, why not? You know? And I say, well, okay. You know, they say, why not? It's just paper. I say, okay, well, your paycheck is just paper too. Would you put a full coffee cup that may be wet on the bottom on top of your paycheck? Yeah? Would you put your paycheck in just any old dirty place? Yeah. Would you step over your paycheck and just, you know, kind of, oh, what's that? Just step over it and disregard it. So again, why would we do that to the Dharma, the texts that describe the Dharma to us, considering that the Dharma is more important than our paycheck? Okay. Then, having taken refuge in the Sangha, do not cultivate the friendship of people who criticize the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or who have unruly behavior or do many harmful actions. By becoming friendly with such people, you may be influenced in the wrong way by them. However, that does not mean you should criticize or not have compassion for them. Okay? So, once you've taken refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you don't want to be best friends, dear close friends, with people who put down your Dharma practice and your refuge objects. Yeah? I mean, in the same way, if something's very precious to you, you're not going to want to be best buddies with somebody who just disregards that and puts that down and ridicules you and, say, why are you doing that? Yeah? And also, we don't want to, having taken refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha and really trying to avoid harming others and not being rough and arrogant and trying to be kind and accepting. If we hang out with people who are drinking and drugging and, just spend hours hanging around gossiping and criticizing other people and bad-mouthing other people, if we hang around people like that, then we're going to become like them. And that's the opposite of what we want to become, isn't it? Yeah. So, but having said that, that doesn't mean we're rude to those people. Yeah. It doesn't mean you see your old friends and you go, well, you're not a Buddhist, so I'm not going to talk to you. I mean, come on. And, sometimes it might even be our family members who disrespect our refuge objects, yeah, or who are acting in very rough and arrogant ways. And there we just have to, be very clear in our refuge, be polite to our family, join in activities, but really, keep a distance so we don't get sucked into that kind of behavior and that kind of way of acting. Yeah, because there can be a lot of pressure from family members. Yeah, and who our family members are, total potluck, isn't it? Yeah, you can have so many different kinds of values among family members, different kinds of personalities, even having similar genes and the same parents. So yeah, so we're polite. We're friendly, but we don't get really tight in a close way with these people and trust them with things and so on. Okay, also respect the monks and nuns as they are people who are making earnest efforts to actualize the teachings. Respecting them helps your mind, for you appreciate their qualities and are open to learn from their example. By respecting even the robes of ordained beings, you will be happy and inspired when seeing them. Okay, so that goes for anybody, whether you're ordained or you're lay, to respect Sangha members. Yeah, it's not that you ordain and now you're part of the Sangha, so you no longer respect the Sangha. And this is very easy. I've seen this happen to many people, when they're lay people, very respectful to the Sangha. Then they ordain and they think, okay, now I'm one of these people. And, I just treat them like I treat anybody else. And then that really damages our practice. So, Sangha members should also respect other Sangha members. And this helps our mind because it's not that when we respect Sangha members, it's not that we're respecting their personalities. Because people can have all different kinds of personalities. You're not respecting them as a person or as a personality. What you're respecting is the precepts that are in their mind, and those precepts came from the Buddha. So that's what you're respecting. Okay? And so when we respect the precepts and we respect people who keep precepts well, that really opens our own mind to learn from their example, and that, of course, benefits us. Okay? I've seen some people kind of compete with the Sangha and say, well, those people are elitist, and, they think that because they're ordained they should sit in the front, and, I'm just as good as them. Why shouldn't I have that privilege? And that kind of attitude of competition or jealousy with the Sangha, actually that creates problem in one's own practice. Yeah? Because, again, you're not respecting that person. You're respecting the precepts that came from the Buddha. Okay? Also, if you're a Sangha member and people show you respect, you do not take it personally. They are not respecting you, so do not get puffed up, and don't go walking into things and think, well, I'm a Sangha member, where's the front row? I'm just going to put myself there because I'm special. Again, it's so interesting sometimes with Westerners. You can see the people who are newly ordained whenever there's a big teaching by His Holiness, because they go sit in the very first row. Because they think, well, now I'm ordained, I go sit in the first row, even above the seniors who've been ordained for decades and decades and decades, or, this kind of arrogance that comes in people because they're wearing the robes. That's totally inappropriate, because like I said, they're not respecting you as a person, they're respecting the precepts. So when people respect you, you should think, I have an obligation and a responsibility to keep my precepts well. Because these people are trusting me. They're respecting that part of me. So I should not be kind of arrogant or dismissive of other people. Very important. And I like when it says here, by respecting even the robes of ordained beings, you will be happy and inspired when seeing them. One of my friends from Dharamsala, one layman, studied in Dharamsala for a while. He lived in New York City, so he went back to New York City. This was maybe 20 years ago. And of course, there weren't many monks and nuns around New York City, especially in those days. And he told me one time he was in the subway station. He was changing subways, and on another platform, he saw a monk. And he was so overjoyed to see a monk that he just went tearing for that other platform, up the stairs, down the escalator, around here, to try and get, because he felt so happy seeing, a Sangha member. So I thought, that shows a really good mind on his part. And it made him very happy. Yeah. Okay, then, so those were the guidelines specifically in relationship to the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Now there's common guidelines, and there's 6 of these. So the first is mindful of the qualities, skills, and differences between the 3 jewels and other possible refuges. Repeatedly take refuge in the Buddha Dharma and Sangha. Okay, so this relates to what we were talking about earlier. If you think of the refuges in other traditions, or if you think just even of the difference in how you relate to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha when you take refuge, then that helps you to take refuge repeatedly. Okay, and then 2 is remembering their kindness. Make offerings to them, especially offering your food before you eat. Okay, so important to think of the kindness of the 3 jewels, and especially how all goodness and all happiness comes from the 3 jewels, because it's the 3 jewels that teach us what to practice and what to abandon, so therefore we know how to create good karma, which is the cause of happiness. Okay, so we make offerings to them. Now, if you're if you're a layperson in a family, if your family is Buddhist, then it's really nice to stop and make the offerings together. I stayed with one family, and the children would say the offering prayers. It was very, very sweet. The kids were really young, and so we all held hands, the whole family held hands, and then the children said the offering prayer. It was really very sweet. When we're with Buddhist friends, of course we can do that. If you're going out to a restaurant, or you're with non-Buddhists, you don't go to everybody, okay, everybody be quiet, I want to pray. You don't make a public demonstration out of this. But you just let everybody talk and do their thing, and in your mind, you do the visualization and make the offering. Okay? Or if it's really hard for you to concentrate, then go to the bathroom, and you have a little privacy, and then, you can do the prayers. Okay, then 3rd is mindful of their compassion, encourage others to take refuge in the 3 jewels. So, when we're aware of the compassionate nature of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, then of course to try and get other people interested. So we don't push the Dharma on anybody. We don't go on street corners and start passing things out. But we also aren't shy, yeah? And we, some people go to the other extreme, and they're closet Buddhists, so that even at their workplace they don't want to tell anybody when people ask, what religion are you? They don't want to say, I'm Buddhist. That's going to an extreme, because I think it can be very beneficial if you're working at a place, when they say, what faith do you follow, or whatever, you can say, I'm Buddhist, or I'm studying Buddhism, or whatever you want. And that can be really helpful to other people. There was one person, I haven't seen her in many years. She worked for the FAA, and she had bright red hair, and she had lupus, so she was in a wheelchair. So they used to call her Hellfire on Wheels, because she had a very big temper. So Miss Hellfire on Wheels started coming to Buddhist classes, and she's really started to change. And, and so one of her colleagues said, kind of, what's happened, like you're really different. And then she said, I'm Buddhist and I'm practicing. And at that time, that's when I was teaching the Lam Rim, the 150 whatever set series. And this man, her colleague, took that whole series of tapes and listened to all of them. He became that interested. Yeah? So it can be really helpful to people. You don't have to hide the fact that you're a Buddhist. Okay? People of other religions certainly don't hide it. Yeah? And one thing is, if you're in a situation where you're with somebody who is trying to convert you to their religion, what I do is I say very clearly, but very politely, thank you, I have my own faith. I think if you practice your faith and the kindness and the ethical conduct that are taught in your faith, it will be very helpful for you. And I'm practicing the kindness and ethical conduct in my own faith. Thank you very much. And then end of conversation. That's if somebody's really pushing and trying to convert you. Okay. Then 4, remembering the benefits of taking refuge. Do so 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening by reciting and reflecting upon any of the refuge prayers. So it could be, the one I take refuge until I'm enlightened, that one that we always say. So when we first get up in the morning, we should take refuge and set our motivation. Before we go to bed at night, we should again take refuge, set our motivation, and then that acts as a very nice bookends for the day. Yeah? So if you have a tendency to forget to take refuge and set your motivation when you wake up, put a little sticker on your alarm clock, or put it on the mirror in the bathroom, or put it on the refrigerator, or put it on your steering wheel, so that you really pause and, nourish yourself spiritually by taking refuge and generating your motivation. And then 5, do all actions by entrusting yourself to the 3 jewels. So whether you're in a happy situation, a sad situation, whether you're in danger, whether you're in comfort, keep your refuge at all times. And then 6, don't forsake your refuge at the cost of your life or even as a joke. Okay? So all those guidelines are set forth to really help us maintain our refuge and to deepen it. And so when I give the refuge ceremony to people, we always go over these guidelines, and then they're written out in the Pearl of Wisdom Book 1, and then also in Pearl of Wisdom Book 1, there is a longer refuge and precept ceremony that I wrote based on Lama Yeshe's teachings. It's on page 84 of the book. And so when people take refuge, I ask that twice a month, either on new and full moon days or every other Sunday or whatever they want to do, but twice a month, there's to stop and really go over the refuge guidelines and think of how well they're keeping them, go over their precepts that they took at the time of refuge, and do some confession if they haven't done the confession before. And then there's a purification verse to say, which is the same one that the Sangha chants. And then to recite the longer refuge ceremony based on Lama Yeshe's teachings. That's on page 84 to 87. Yeah, and that includes also the precepts. Okay, so I think that's very good for lay people who have taken refuge, so that they really get reinvigorated. And then, if there's a few of you together, then every other week you can meet together and do this. Now, the lay guests at the Abbey, that's what they do on the new and full moon days. Some people say that you can take refuge again and again with different teachers. Some people say once you've taken refuge and the precepts, you don't need to retake them, you have it already. It's very important when you take refuge, you're taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. You're not taking refuge in a particular Buddhist tradition or a particular Buddhist lineage. You're taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha that are the same for all Buddhists. Okay? And so, if you want to take refuge and then later on you're studying with somebody else and you want to retake refuge to strengthen it, you can request that. And if that teacher is a person who gives it again, then yeah, you can go ahead and do that. If you could keep them perfectly, then you don't need to take them. Yeah? The precepts are trainings. Yeah? And this is why it's important to translate them as trainings or precepts and not as vows. Because vows gives you this idea of you have to do it number one or else. Whereas these are very much things that we're training ourselves to do. They're advices that we're trying to practice because we know they're good for us. Yeah? So to take them, you have to, of course, have some sense of self-confidence that you can keep them reasonably well. But you don't need to think, I've got to do everything number one perfectly or else. Because who does everything number one perfectly besides the Buddha? Okay, who doesn't need to take the precepts, but we need to take them. Okay, so we take them because we can't do them perfectly. I don't think that it's absolutely imperative. If you have refuge in your heart and there's nobody around, you may live in a place where there's no other practitioners or whatever, you're taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and you have a direct line to them. Yeah? At a later time, maybe you want to take refuge when you meet other people who are Buddhists who you can do the ceremony with. Yeah? But refuge is a quality in your heart.
For many people, like inmates and some of the people in safe or
way far away. Yeah, yeah. So you're saying like the inmates or some people who are doing Sravasti Abbey Friends education, the SAFE program. They live very far away. There's nobody there to take refuge with. That's why sometimes we do refuge over the phone. I've given refuge and precepts over the phone several times with inmates. So, yeah. And so I suppose it could be done for safe participants too, who, live very far away and can't come here. I always wonder about that too, because the computer, there's Dharma in it, but you don't see that when you see the computer, and it's kind of, yeah. So I still think good to treat it with respect, but yeah.